Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. In March of 2026, AI became the single largest stated reason for U.S. layoffs, responsible for roughly 1 in 4 of all planned job cuts that month. Not a recession, not a market crash, artificial intelligence. Today, we're breaking down the AI layoff wave, which companies are cutting, how many people are actually being displaced, and what the data tells us about who's really at risk. By the end of this episode, you'll know how to read past the headlines, understand which industries are most exposed, and why the scariest number might not be the one making the news. I've got someone here who's been deep in this data, so let's get into it. What is actually happening out there right now?
So the first thing worth establishing is what we're actually counting when we say AI layoff, because the number depends entirely on how you define it. The most credible trackers like Founder Reports only include a company when the company itself, through a CEO memo, an SEC filing, an earnings call, or an official statement, has explicitly tied workforce reductions to AI or automation. No rumors, no analyst speculation, just what companies said on the record.
So we're talking about companies putting it in writing.
Exactly. And when you apply that standard, the numbers are still staggering. In 2024, about 18,000 AI-related job losses were documented globally from a handful of companies. That jumped to over 100,000 in 2025. And then in just the first 6 months of 2026, more than 150,000 roles have already been cut. That's according to Programs.com, which reviewed hundreds of company disclosures and earnings calls.
Wait, 150,000 in 6 months? That's more than the entire previous year.
Right, it's about a 50% increase over all of 2025, and we're only halfway through the year. The pace is accelerating, and the scale of individual company cuts is what really drives it home. Oracle cut 21,000 employees, roughly 13% of its entire workforce, in a single fiscal year. They went from 162,000 employees down to 141,000. And they said it explicitly in their annual regulatory filing. The adoption and deployment of AI technologies across our operations have resulted and may continue to result in reductions to our workforce.
That's not a vague statement. That's a company putting it in a legal document.
It's about as official as it gets. And Oracle isn't alone. Amazon cut around 30,000 corporate jobs across late 2025 and early 2026. Meta cut 8,000, Block cut 4,000. Accenture cut roughly 11,000 in December 2025. Their CEO Julie Sweet said, and I'm quoting here, "Those we cannot reskill will be exited." Salesforce shed about 4,000 customer service roles after their CEO said on a podcast that he needs less heads. McKinsey cut 6,000. Microsoft has had multiple rounds. The list goes on.
And these aren't struggling companies. A lot of these are posting strong revenues.
That's one of the most important things to understand here.
Elastic, for example, just announced layoffs affecting 7% of its workforce, and in the same breath reported a 16% year-over-year revenue increase. These cuts aren't distress signals. They're strategic restructuring. Companies are using AI to do more with fewer people, and the people are the ones absorbing the cost of that efficiency. So it's not, we're losing money, we need to cut. It's, we're doing great, and we need fewer humans to keep doing great.
That's a really clean way to put it. And that distinction matters because it changes the policy conversation entirely. This isn't a cyclical downturn where jobs come back when the economy recovers. This is structural. The roles being eliminated aren't coming back.
Let's talk about who's getting hit, because I think a lot of people assume this is a tech worker problem, coders, engineers, that kind of thing. But that's not the full picture, right?
Not even close. According to Programs.com, AI layoff announcements are coming from finance, logistics, consulting, media, retail, and manufacturing, not just tech. And since 2025, at least 9 companies have announced AI-related layoffs affecting 10,000 or more employees each. That list includes Accenture, Amazon, Citigroup, Dell, HSBC, Intel, Microsoft, TCS, and UPS. That's banking, shipping, hardware, consulting, a real cross-section of the economy.
UPS is on that list. That's logistics. That's not what most people picture when they think about AI taking jobs.
Right, and that's the point. The displacement map, based on data from the WEF Future of Jobs report and McKinsey AI Impact Analysis, shows customer support at a 41% displacement rate. That's the highest. Media and publishing at 35%. Tech and software at 28%. marketing and advertising at 26%, finance and banking at 24%, legal services at 22%. These are all knowledge worker roles, not factory floors.
Customer support at 41%, that's almost half the field.
And it makes financial sense from a company's perspective. AI-driven support resolution costs a fraction of what a human agent costs per ticket. Klarna, the fintech company, cut 40% of its workforce and specifically cited AI automation of customer service roles. That was reported by CNBC. The economics are just too compelling for companies to ignore.
Okay, so here's something I want to push on a little. There's this thing floating around, AI washing, where companies use AI as the stated reason for layoffs when the real driver is something else entirely. How much of what we're seeing is actually AI, and how much is just convenient branding for cost cutting?
This is a really important question, and the data is actually pretty damning on this point. According to founder reports, nearly 6 in 10 companies admit they frame layoffs or hiring slowdowns as AI-driven when the real reason is financial. And the term AI washing, using AI as a cover story for cuts that would have happened anyway, was actually flagged by OpenAI's own CEO, Sam Altman.
So the CEO of one of the biggest AI companies is calling out other companies for using AI as an excuse.
Which is a wild dynamic, right? And it complicates the data. But here's the thing, even if you discount the AI washing, the confirmed numbers are still enormous. And the trend is clearly accelerating regardless of the stated reason. AI was cited as the reason for 21,490 US job cuts in April 2026 alone. That's 26% of all layoffs that month, up from just 5% in 2025. That's a massive shift in a single year.
From 5% to 26% in 1 year. That's not a gradual trend, that's a cliff.
And through April 2026, AI has been cited in 49,135 US job cuts, nearly matching the entire 2025 total, and we're only 4 months in. According to Challenger, Gray & Christmas, the outplacement firm that tracks this data, AI is now the #1 most cited cause for layoffs in 2026. That's never happened before.
Let's zoom out for a second, because there's also this interesting wrinkle. California just launched something pretty unprecedented in response to all of this. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is a fascinating government response. Governor Gavin Newsom announced the California AI Unemployment Tracker just days ago. It's described as the nation's first public dashboard to track potential job losses linked to AI. It was developed with the California Employment Development Department and researchers at the University of California's California Policy Lab. The idea is that it functions as an early warning system to guide workforce policies, job training, retraining, employment assistance.
So the government is essentially building a radar system for AI job displacement.
That's a good way to put it. And interestingly, the initial analysis that came with the tracker found no evidence of widespread AI-related increases in unemployment claims statewide. But, and this is the nuance, researchers did report higher claims among college-educated workers in occupations with high AI exposure, particularly in the San Francisco Bay Area, following the 2022 release of ChatGPT. So the macro picture looks stable, but there are pockets of real pain.
That's actually a theme I keep seeing in the research. The macro data doesn't show a catastrophe, but the micro-level impact is concentrated and real. The Budget Lab at Yale found something similar, right?
Exactly. The Budget Lab at Yale, this is a team including researchers from Brookings Metro, found that the broader labour market has not experienced a discernible disruption since ChatGPT's release. Their measures of employment, occupational mix, and AI exposure show no statistically clear correlation with broad unemployment. But they're careful to say this doesn't mean it won't happen. Historically, widespread technological disruption takes decades, not months.
So we might be in the early innings of something much bigger.
That's the honest read. And the economists are split on how bad it gets. Goldman Sachs' senior global economist Joseph Briggs estimates that more than 9% of the US labor force, roughly 15 million workers, could be displaced during a decade-long AI transition. But he thinks the disruption will be temporary because new industries and occupations will absorb workers over time.
15 million people is not a small number, even if it's temporary.
No, it's not. And not everyone is as optimistic as Briggs. MIT's Daron Acemoglu, a Nobel laureate in economics, expects a net negative impact on employment over the next 5 years. He said, and I'm quoting directly, AI is more likely to replace than augment jobs in the near term, so I expect a net negative impact on the number of jobs in the coming years. That's a Nobel laureate saying the near-term picture is genuinely negative.
And Goldman Sachs' own economist, Elsie Peng, said AI augmentation has created jobs, but not enough to fully offset the losses from AI substitution. So even the optimists are admitting there's a gap.
Right. The net positive story depends on new jobs emerging fast enough and being accessible enough to the people who lost their old ones. And that's where the skills gap becomes a real problem. Research published on SSRN found that 77% of new AI-related jobs require master's degrees. So if you're a customer service rep who just got automated out of a job, the new AI ethics officer role isn't exactly a lateral move.
That's a brutal gap. You lose a job that required a high school diploma, and the replacement requires a graduate degree.
And this is where the generational dimension gets really concerning. According to Founder Reports, employment for workers ages 22 to 25 in AI-exposed occupations has declined approximately 13% since late 2022. Meanwhile, employment for older workers in those same fields held steady or actually grew 6 to 9%. So younger workers are bearing a disproportionate share of the displacement.
Wait, so older workers in AI-exposed fields are doing fine, but younger workers in the same fields are down 13%?
That's what the data shows. And it connects to another trend that I think is actually more alarming than the headline layoff numbers. It's not just about firing people, it's about not hiring them in the first place. According to Founder Reports, 21% of companies have already frozen entry-level hiring because of AI, and 36% expect to do so by the end of 2026. And High Five's research found that 66% of enterprises are reducing entry-level hiring due to AI.
So the pipeline into the workforce is getting cut off before people even get started.
Exactly. And that's a different kind of crisis than mass layoffs. It's quieter, it's harder to track, and it doesn't show up in unemployment numbers because these are people who never got hired. The Budget Lab at Yale actually describes this as suppressed hiring rather than mass firing, and that framing matters because it changes how we think about solutions.
Here's something that genuinely surprised me when I was looking at this. 80% of organizations deploying autonomous business technology have reduced their workforce. But studies have found no correlation between those AI-related layoffs and improved ROI. So companies are cutting people and not even necessarily getting better results? That's one of the most underreported findings in all of this. The assumption is that AI adoption equals efficiency gains equals better business outcomes. But the data doesn't support that cleanly. And yet 51% of business leaders say their company will lay off workers in 2026 because AI is consolidating or eliminating roles. So you have this wave of cuts happening even when the ROI case isn't proven.
That's almost like a herd mentality. Everyone's doing it, so we have to do it too. There's definitely an element of that. And it connects back to the AI washing problem. Some of these cuts are about signaling to investors that you're an AI-forward company, not necessarily about genuine operational efficiency. Oracle is a good example of this tension. They cut 21,000 people and simultaneously signed a $300 billion 5-year deal with OpenAI to provide AI compute power. The workforce reductions appear to be partly a way to fund that infrastructure investment.
So in some cases, people are losing jobs not because AI replaced them, but because the company needed cash to buy AI infrastructure.
That's the read from multiple analysts covering Oracle's filing. And it's a really uncomfortable reality. The human cost of the AI arms race isn't just about automation replacing tasks. It's also about capital reallocation. Companies are moving money from payroll to compute.
Let's talk about the people actually building AI, because there's been a pretty remarkable shift there recently. The companies creating these tools are now openly acknowledging the damage they might cause.
This is significant. According to a Forbes analysis from late June 2026, in just 2 days, 3 of the largest names in AI all moved in the same direction, committing to study how AI impacts jobs and workers. Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei said AI may cause more job loss than other recent technological advancements, and potentially for a long time. Anthropic has committed $200 million to study the economic impact, and Anthropic has also recommended a federal structure for addressing the economic disruptions caused by AI.
$200 million to study the harm your own product might cause. That's not a small gesture. It's a signal. When the people who stand to profit most from AI start funding research into the harm it creates, the question of whether disruption will happen becomes less relevant. The question becomes, what do we do about it? And Sam Altman even met with Senator Bernie Sanders to discuss the possibility of the government owning shares of AI companies, which is a wild conversation to be having. Okay, but here's the counterpoint I want to make sure we give space to. There's also data showing that AI creates jobs. The SSRN research found that while 85 million jobs could be displaced, 97 million new roles could emerge, a net positive of 12 million globally. And High Fives research found that AI-related job creation reached about 119,900 roles in 2024, actually exceeding confirmed AI-driven job losses that year.
That's real, and it's important context. The net job creation story is plausible over the long run, but the timing mismatch is the problem. The jobs being destroyed are happening now, in specific communities, to specific people. The jobs being created are often in different fields, require different skills, and are concentrated in different geographies. The SSRN research also found that 77% of new AI jobs require master's degrees, so the people losing jobs aren't necessarily the ones who can access the new ones.
And MIT's Neil Thompson made an interesting point about this. He said AI's technical capability alone doesn't guarantee widespread job losses, because reliability, data access, costs, and practical deployment are real constraints. He described the impact as a rising tide rather than a crashing wave.
That's a useful frame. And it's probably the most accurate description of where we are right now, a rising tide. The macro unemployment data isn't showing a catastrophe, but the tide is rising faster than most people expected, and it's not rising evenly. Young workers, entry-level workers, customer service workers, content creators, they're already feeling the water at their ankles.
And there's a small business angle here that's actually kind of hopeful. A U.S. Chamber of Commerce survey found that 82% of small businesses using AI actually increased their staff. So the dynamic is different at smaller companies.
Right, and that makes sense.
Small businesses tend to use AI as a productivity tool, automating the overhead and repetitive tasks while keeping humans for the judgment calls and client relationships. The Forbes analysis on this made the point that small businesses, because they know their employees personally, are better positioned to protect human capital while automating inefficiencies. The mass layoff dynamic is much more of a large company phenomenon. More than 60% of announced AI layoffs occurred at companies with over 100,000 employees. So this is really a big company story.
Exactly. And that's worth sitting with. The companies with the most resources, the most leverage, and the most ability to absorb the cost of transition are the ones making the cuts. The workers who are least able to absorb the disruption are the ones bearing it.
So when you step back from all of this, the numbers, the company announcements, the economist forecasts, what does it actually come down to?
Here's what I keep coming back to. The headline numbers, 150,000 jobs cut in 6 months, Oracle cutting 21,000, AI as the #1 cause of layoffs in 2026, those are real and they matter. But the more consequential story might be the one that doesn't make headlines, the quiet closing of the entry-level door. When 66% of enterprises are reducing entry-level hiring because of AI, that's not just a layoff story. That's a story about who gets to build a career at all.
And that's a generational story. The 22 to 25-year-olds in AI-exposed fields have already seen a 13% employment decline since late 2022. That's not a future risk. That's already happening.
And the response has to match the scale of the problem.
California's AI job loss tracker is a start. An early warning system is better than no warning system. Anthropic's $200 million commitment to study the economic impact is a start. But the structural question, who pays for the transition, and how do displaced workers access the new jobs that require master's degrees, that's still largely unanswered. Goldman Sachs says the disruption will be temporary. MIT's Acemoglu says the near term is net negative. The Budget Lab at Yale says the macro data doesn't show a crisis yet. So we have smart people looking at the same reality and reaching different conclusions.
Which is actually the honest state of the evidence. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how this plays out is overstating their certainty. What we do know is that the pace is accelerating, the concentration is uneven, and the people with the least cushion are absorbing the most risk. That's not a prediction, that's what the data already shows.
And there's something almost paradoxical about the ROI finding. 80% of organizations deploying AI have reduced their workforce, but there's no proven correlation between those cuts and better business results. So we're in this moment where companies are making irreversible decisions about people's livelihoods based on a bet that hasn't fully paid off yet.
That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of all of this. The AI transition is being funded, in part, by the people who are losing their jobs to it. And the returns, if they materialize, will flow to shareholders and executives, not to the workers who absorbed the cost. That's not a new dynamic in technological transitions, but the speed of this one makes it harder to manage.
Here's what this really comes down to, I think. We started this conversation with a number. 1 in 4 US layoffs in March 2026 blamed on AI. And that number is real and it's significant. But the number that should probably stick with you is 66%. The share of enterprises already cutting off entry-level hiring because of AI. Because that's not about people losing jobs they have. That's about people never getting the chance to start.
And that's the version of this story that doesn't show up in unemployment statistics, doesn't generate a press release, and doesn't get a tracker. It's invisible in the macro data, but it's shaping the career trajectories of an entire generation. The question worth asking isn't just how many jobs has AI eliminated, it's how many careers never got to begin. That's a question that deserves a real answer, and right now, we don't have one. Thanks for being here and walking through all of this. And to everyone listening, this is Copilot Podcasts. The next time you see a headline about AI layoffs, you now have the context to read past the number and ask the harder question: who's actually bearing the cost, and is anyone making sure the door back in stays open?